All right. Welcome to free live training, why teams shut down after mistakes and what coaches can do to fix it. I'm Libby Triolo. I'm a mental performance strategist, a licensed professional counselor, and the creator of the Strong Framework. All right. So I've been in the mental health field for about 9 years, almost 10. I've been kind of all over the map. I've worked with countless kids, parents, organizations, and I'm a former competitive athlete myself. I played soccer growing up, but always grew up around hockey. My cousins were hockey players, so being around the rink is not something I am foreign to. And I was a billet mom for a junior hockey team. And through that process, I realized how much pressure these kids are under and how little emphasis there is on the mental part of the game. So I created the Strong Framework. I started working with individual athletes, and then from that, really saw the need for the coaching aspect, because you as coaches are exposed. You will see an athlete exponentially more than I ever will. And if we can create really positive team environments where the mental game is at the forefront, we can create really strong, sound development programs for sports, but also just great development for individual athletes. I work with competitive coaches who want more than just motivation, don't want just pep talks and the same old speeches. They're people who want a system. So I bring my clinical depth as a professional counselor, my lived experience as an athlete and a billet parent, and then I meld that together into a coaching framework where you can implement these mental performance skills into practice week in and week out of the season. So it's not mindset theory. It's not therapy on the bench. It's really a coach-led performance system that you can use over and over again and develop really strong athletes. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about why players shut down after mistakes, why that's not a confidence issue. We're going to touch on the coaching phrases that really backfire. So those things that sound really helpful but aren't actually teaching your players how to reset, how reactive teams are created. So unintentional patterns that build emotional reactivity across an entire season, which ultimately is going to hurt development and performance. We'll get into what high-performing teams do differently. So what they do after mistakes, goals against them, and in high-pressure moments that sets them apart. Practical ways to build response into practice. So building that composure, resilience, and reset woven directly into what you're already doing as a coach. And then I'll introduce you to kind of the Strong Framework and how you as a coach can use it to create more consistent, mentally tough teams. So the real problem here is that your team, your players don't have a confidence issue. They have an awareness issue and a reps issue. So most performance is breaking down after mistakes long before the mistake actually happens, and well before a shutdown happens. And that's visible on the ice to parents, other teams, and that's what we're going to target. So what really is happening is athletes are reacting to things before they recognize. So they don't really connect to or realize what they're feeling. Is it frustration, shame, fear, anxiety? And it's already controlling their body language and their decisions. And then that emotion gets misread as failure. So a player often will confuse I feel bad with I am bad. And that mental switch is really where the shutdown begins. And then the spiral becomes the pattern, right? What we do frequently becomes reinforced, and that becomes the path of least resistance. And that's how we respond always. So over time, unmanaged reactions after mistakes now become automatic. So now we're wiring that into team culture, and that's not the intention. So let's get kind of into the shutdown cycle, right? So what happens inside an athlete between the mistake and the bench, right? And why it often repeats. So a mistake will happen, a bad pass, a missed shot, a defensive breakdown, positioning issue, whatever it might be. And then we get into the emotional spike. So the shame, the frustration, the fear, anxiety flood the system, right? And then most athletes don't have the reset tool. So they don't have the awareness and they don't have the skill. So the emotion takes over and becomes the thing in the driving seat. And then the shutdown or the outburst happens. So that's the head down, the bad body language, slamming the stick, yelling at teammates, disengage, or reactive behavior. And then what happens after that, where this becomes the cycle, is now we fear our next mistake. So a player plays small or timid, and the cycle is really reinforced. So the great news is that every piece of this cycle is coachable, and the mistake isn't the problem itself. You guys know this as coaches, right? In all sports, but especially in hockey, mistakes are part of the game, right? They run rampant. That's the point, right? It's you capitalize on other people's mistakes. So the mistake isn't necessarily the issue. That's part of the game. It's missing the awareness and the reset tool. That's the issue. And that's what we're going to fix today. So phrases that sound helpful, but don't actually teach the reset. So a coach might say something like, just shake it off, right? The player is hearing, my emotions don't matter here, and I need to pretend that I'm fine, right? You might say, you just need to calm down. The player hears, something is wrong with me for feeling this way right now. Or you say something like, there's no reason to be upset. The athlete thinks, my coach doesn't understand me. I'll just keep it inside. Something's wrong with me if I'm upset about this, right? And then this is a big one. You know better than that, right? The player hears, I disappointed them. I'm a failure, not I'm bad. Don't make them another mistake, right? That's the fear piece. So these responses really shut down emotion without building the skill to manage it, right? So players maybe get quieter, but not calmer. They might get more careful, but they're not more confident, and they're not actually learning, hockey IQ or the flow of the game. They're almost like memorizing plays versus being creative. And here's the biggest thing. It's like your intent is not to create this unhelpful response, but the impact is different. And that's what we're looking at, intent versus impact. So reactive teams are built over a season. They are really, reinforced and built over a season. So no coach really intends this, right? But it happens through repeated, well-meaning responses, typically. There's coaches that do things with good intentions, and then there's things that the team is learning from that over time. So if you correct behavior before validating emotion, right? Like you're jumping straight from, you should not have done that, or you should have done this differently, before the player is regulated enough to hear it. You call out mistakes publicly, often in the moment. There's a difference between the coaching, and then there's a difference between like how the kind of the public shame, and even with good intent, like public correction can build fear of failure really quickly, not just with that particular athlete that got called out, but within the team. And then focus on feedback, focusing your feedback on outcomes and not responses. So you say things like, you that cost us that goal, that play, here's what to do next time. That's what we want to focus on. Or, we lost the game because of this, and this. We want to focus on the process, not the outcome. So over time, your team is learning that mistakes are dangerous, right? I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to be perceived as a bad player. I don't want to be perceived as a failure. So I'm going to hesitate. I'm going to play conservatively. Maybe I make a mistake, and my body language shows that I'm defeated. Emotions become hidden. So frustration is underground until it's not. And players are disengaging rather than expressing. So the shutdown becomes safer than the choice, right? To act, to try something new. And then the bench energy really drops after a bad play, right? So inconsistent emotional culture spreads. One player spiral can really like pull down the rest of the team, the whole line, and that energy is contagious. So my biggest thing is like, you're not creating a reactive team on purpose. But without a system to teach these skills, build in these reps at the same rate that you're building physical development, the reactive team culture can be kind of a byproduct of that. All right. So we really want to, I touched on this before, but this intent versus impact, right? Your intent doesn't always match what the player is receiving. So understanding that gap really changes everything for a team, right? When intent and impact are mismatched, it creates a lot of this culture unintentionally, right? So if your intent is to motivate a player by calling them out publicly after a mistake, right, as a coachable moment, as a driving, pushing factor for a specific athlete, your intent is positive, it's well-meaning, but the impact is that player feels embarrassed, right? They might lose confidence, they become more hesitant, and that's not what we want. Also, the player that didn't get called out, they're now afraid to make a mistake because they don't want to be called out. If your intent is to encourage your players and toughen them up during a hard game, definitely something we want to do. We want to create that mental toughness, but then we start to teach players that emotions aren't allowed, and then it's easier to shut down and kind of cave in on myself than it is to ask for support. And then this one I see a lot is you push a skilled player harder because you see their potential, right? But now that player feels almost unfairly pressured, and they begin to kind of resent the sport, resent you. And I think it dims the light of other players around them because they see you pushing that player, and they're like, if after they make a mistake, well, then they're not developing, they're not taking chances, they're not playing creatively because they don't want that kind of attention on them. When your intent and your impact is aligned, you're using positive reinforcement for effort-based plays. Your players are feeling more motivated, encouraged to keep working hard because it's not just outcomes we're focusing on, we're looking at the effort that gets and creates outcomes. And if you can set clear, realistic expectations for improvement, players really start to understand what's expected of them, and then they can focus in on that steady growth, and they feel that motivation that they can now own as well. And then if you address mistakes with constructive feedback and solutions, players often start to see mistakes as the learning opportunity that they are, and they stay engaged for shutting down. So my general rule is praise in public, you correct in private, unless it's a pretty feedback focused correction that like the whole team can go from. But embarrassing your players in front of their peers is really the fastest way to kill confidence, even if your feedback is accurate. So what high performing teams do after mistakes that's the difference, right? That changes everything, is how you respond to mistakes. So it's really not necessarily talent. It's not toughness. It's really a system, and it's things that you can coach. So high-level teams have a shared language for mistakes. So everyone on the team, coaches, players, knows what to say and what to do in that moment. There's no confusion about expectations. There's a plan. So things like everybody understands, like, what do I notice right now? What was my perspective there? How do I take feedback? How do I stay coachable? They name reset routines that players self-initiate. There's constant post-mistake language from bench staff, right? So it is clear, it's concise, and it's focused on the next thing, the next shift, not the past, right? A player can't change the past. We are really focused on the present moment and what we can do to impact the game right now. Coaches really reinforce response, so they're not just focused on result. So feedback focuses on what players can control, their effort, their body language, the next play, where they focus, how they communicate. We're not focused on the outcome of the mistake, right? So you can say things like, I loved how you got back in position. I loved how you back checked so hard. You got into the corners, whatever it might be. Effort and resilience are recognized publicly, not just goals and assists. And results are really discussed, and responses are celebrated. That's what we want there, right? We want to shift that focus. And then reset is trained in practice throughout the season, not just addressed after breakdowns. So mental skills are built during drills and scrimmages. So when they need to access them in the game, players have those skills. They have that muscle memory. They have that cognitive pathway that is automatic that they can do faster in a game. That's what we want. So we're not just discussing these concepts after a bad game. We're doing it all the time, just like you would do with any other physical skill, right? We can't expect these skills to show up in games when we don't practice them at practice. So we build in pressure drills where we build in reset moments, quick awareness prompts between your shifts, and then composure is reinforced in the same rep as the skill. So really the core difference between high-performing teams is really reactive teams wait for a crisis and then they try to fix it. Consistent teams train response the same way they train a power play, with repetition, language, and structure that's built in daily at practice. So a tool that you can use just today, tomorrow, I know it's the off season technically, but as you're getting into, summer camps, prepping for next season, right? There's the awareness check-in. So it's a 60-second tool that really interrupts the shutdown cycle before it takes hold. It's simple enough to use on the bench, and it's super powerful to change the pattern, right? So we would use it after a mistake, on the bench between shifts, when your frustration is spiking, in the locker room after a difficult period, after, a goal against, maybe during a timeout. Those are the moments to use it. So it's only 2 questions. What am I feeling right now? And what triggered it? We have to build awareness into these skills, right? Like I said in a couple slides ago, a lot of these athletes do not have the awareness to know what they're feeling, and the emotion takes hold, right? We have to call it out, and we have to have awareness around what we're feeling so we can address it, solve our problem, move forward. So it's not analysis, it's not fixing, it's not a long conversation. Awareness comes before the adjustment. The goal is really not emotional control, it's emotional recognition, right? We have to name it first, and then we coach it. The second tool that I'm going to give you today is reset language that is going to actually work, right? Match your intent and your impact. So if an athlete spirals after a mistake, instead of saying, shake it off, you got it, come on, get your head in the game, you say, pause for a second, what are you feeling right now? What triggered it, right? Let them start to gain the awareness. They know they messed up, right? They have to figure out how to name the emotion in that moment. And then if you notice frustration turns into anger on the bench, what a lot of people say is you need to calm down or just move on. No one in the history of being upset and being told to calm down actually calms down when they're told to calm down. So what actually works is, I see you're really frustrated. That makes a lot of sense. Let's name that before we move on. When an athlete shuts down and goes quiet, right? What really backfires is, what's wrong with you? Get your head up. You got this. What actually works is, you don't need to explain anything. Just notice what's happening to you internally, right? We don't want to push too hard in that moment, especially with kids, because they have to figure out how they feel. And if we tell them how they feel, or we tell them what they do to kind of, and to sweep an emotion under the rug, we're really creating a pattern that becomes really hard to break. So you want short prompts now. You want the teaching to be later. So in the moment, you're not coaching technique, you're restoring regulation, right? Regulation before coaching, always. Once they're regulated, now they can hear you. Now they can internalize what you're saying. Now they can think about it, and it becomes a part of their development. But when our emotional brain is in charge, memory goes down the toilet. So that is really something to think about too. If a player is dysregulated, regulation always comes first, because if you want them to actually hear what you're saying, they have to be in the frontal cortex of their brain. And the third tool is build the response into practice. So mental skills improve when they're reinforced regularly, just like practicing a physical skill. So we want small, repeatable skills that we do consistently, and that's going to beat occasional long conversations every day of the week. So 3 ways to integrate this into your practice is plug and play moments. So use a 30 to second response routine, reset routine in real time, right? So after a penalty, bad play, emotional outburst, goal against, we want consistent language as a team to redirect the behavior without stopping the practice, right? If you were to move and forward and do some be a strong coach, you would look at like 1 strong focus per week. So you're going to choose one mental skill. You're going to choose one mental skill to use, revisit it across multiple practices. 1 sec. Hi there. All right. And then quick awareness prompts between shifts. So what did you notice? You got to stay aware. You got to have a next shift attitude. So we're going to use 3-word cues that are going to build self-awareness without pulling time from practice. So a sample drill for this might be is a reset under pressure. So you can use this with kids 10 and up, and you can adapt this to any skill drill, really. So first you're going to run a high intensity pressure drill, a battle, a breakout, a time sequence, something like that. And then you're going to add forced adversity within that drill. A penalty's called, a change in scenario, playing from behind, whatever it might be. And then when a player makes a mistake, you're going to pause briefly and ask them, what do you notice right now? And then you're going to have them use their reset cue before the next rep. I like 3 reset routines, super simple, super quick. It's deep breath, physical cue, a stick tap, adjust your helmet, wiggle your fingers in your skates, whatever it might be, and then a verbal cue. I got this, that's done, next shift, whatever it might be, right? We're going to teach that to our athletes, and they're going to use it in practice every day. And then you praise composure. So it's not just execution, right? We're going to celebrate the reset, right? If you're focusing on you're doing a drill, you're doing it to reinforce the mental aspect of the game, the mindset skills we're using, that becomes the praisable component of the drill. So we're going to celebrate the reset, not just the result, whether someone scores, a great save, a block shot, whatever it is, we are praising the execution of the reset. And then you're going to reflect after. So reflect with the team. Were you able to move on quickly? What helped you reset? Right? So really, this is a big component of the strong framework that I've created. And it's a repeatable 6-pillar mental performance system. And it's really built exclusively for coaches to use and implement throughout the season, right? It's not motivational speeches or therapy on the bench. It's really creating the team culture and environment that you're looking to help you develop the full athlete, right? So there's self-awareness and mindset. That's kind of what we got into mostly today. Was athletes can't regulate what they don't recognize. So you have to teach them how to notice their thoughts and emotions without the judgment, and then pause and create the gap between emotional trigger and reaction or response. We want a gap so that the emotion isn't the driver of the response. And then we get really into some thought and emotional regulation. So emotion isn't the problem. We're human. We experience the whole array of emotion. It's unregulated emotion. That's the problem. And that's where the gap comes in. So when athletes learn to pause, regulate their nervous system, and then refocus, they're going to have better behavior that follows whatever that emotional trigger was, right? We don't want reactivity. We want a regulated response. And then we get into focusing on response over results. So we want athletes to be focused on the process. Outcomes will follow, right? If we're really honed in on the process of development, and that's our focus, we reduce performance anxiety, we reduce fear of mistakes, and we create athletes that understand that the effort is what's going to get them the outcome they want. So we focus in on what athletes can control: their effort, their body language, their next play, where their focus goes, communication. And then we're reinforcing the response that builds a faster recovery for mistakes. And then ownership and confidence. So confidence doesn't come from praise. Confidence doesn't come from false confidence, comes from outcomes. But what happens is when the outcomes go away, you're in a slump, you're having a rough season, the confidence goes down the drain with it. So we really want confidence that comes from the process and the effort. And we want athletes to own that. So learning to take responsibility without the shame and build the real confidence through preparation and knowing that I'm confident not because I score a lot of goals. I'm confident because I faced adversity and I trust myself to navigate my way through it. That's true confidence. Navigating adversity. So really, mental skills are trained when things are hard. And I think that's the biggest gap I see in a lot of the individual athletes I work with is they'll try mental skills for about 2 times. And then if it doesn't work, they quit on them, or they think, oh, I'm in a better place. It's fine. And I don't have to keep practicing these things, which is really silly because you wouldn't do that with any physical skill, right? You keep practicing, you keep getting in the reps. So we really want athletes to move through setbacks, slumps, and pressure with resilience and not avoidance. And then we get into group culture and leadership. So the individual mindset builds team culture, and we want that to be built through shared standards, peer accountability, and communicating norms, so we can reduce the emotional chaos and create consistent team environments. And I know for coaches, right, so much of this is so powerful when it's like built within the system. It's not, you don't have to police behavior and how people are responding. It's like a team, anybody on the team can be the leader in that. And that is really built through a shared culture and shared expectations. So, in real time, we're really looking at, an example might be a player snaps at a teammate, and that's a T issue before an accountability issue. If a player is spiraling after a mistake, that's an R, reset issue. Really, I built this framework as a way for you to tell exactly what to coach in that moment. And for the live attendees today, we have the Standards Over Outcome Coaching Guide that I will be emailing to you. And that's a practical framework that I built. It's a guide you can implement on day 1 of the season. So this is how we create those shared standards so that players are holding each other accountable, and you will all have a shared set of language of how you're responding to adversity. So we really work in this guide to shift from outcomes to standards. So specific things you can say, how you as a team can respond to each other when there is a mistake. So you are protecting that bench energy, which is what we want. And this is really built specifically for hockey. So I will be emailing that to the live attendees today. So today we really got into response to mistakes. You will be emailed the replay as well for anybody who joined late. And if you are interested in learning more about the Strong program, to implement this, to have the guide, the plug and play drills, all of the system, then I would be happy to chat with you. There'll be a link if you want to book a call with me to tell me kind of about you and your team and your experience as a coach, and see if the Strong framework is what you're looking for.